Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 15th, 2024. Happy first day of the Republican National Convention. In a decision and announcement on Truth Social, Donald Trump announced that he is choosing Senator JD Vance as his vice presidential running mate in the 2024 presidential election. Now, JD Vance was one of three major contenders that were up for consideration for the Veep stakes. That was alongside Senator Marco Rubio from the state of Florida and Governor Doug Burgum from the state of North Dakota. JD Vance's announcement that he's now going to be the VP was probably one of the poorer decisions that Donald Trump could have made in deciding who would be serving second in command should Donald Trump be elected this coming November. In this video, we're going to be unpacking a JD Vance candidacy for vice president and why I personally believe this was the wrong political decision for Donald Trump given his two other options. Now, to give you a bit of context around JD Vance and why in the first place, many people were even saying from the very beginning that JD Vance would be a weak running mate. Members of the right, members of the left agreed that JD Vance would not be the right person for Donald Trump. At 39 years old, he comes in as the VP that is chosen with the least amount of experience in decades for the Republican Party, completely invalidating an argument around Vice President Kamala Harris that they brought up back in 2020. In addition, JD Vance coming into this position very much young, but also with a strong digital footprint, one that Republicans have to defend and that JD Vance himself will have to put up to the test this coming November. Now, JD Vance has a long list of scandals here. This is an article link. This is a Google document compiled of pretty much everything that JD Vance has said in the past, things that would be weaponized by the left to turn against JD Vance and prove that he should not be the vice president and neither should Donald Trump be the president. And I want you to just really glance through this and understand the amount of advertisement material that Democrats are working with now that JD Vance has been chosen. I think that what we knew about Marco Rubio and Doug Burgum, one, that Doug Burgum was clearly the safe choice when it came down to media and past comments. Doug Burgum has almost never criticized President Trump. Marco Rubio, on the other hand, has been a very much staunch advocate for Donald Trump since the 2016 election, but had a whole year of attacking him on the campaign trail. JD Vance equally had that, except it wasn't on the campaign trail. JD Vance has made tweets where in 2016 he announced that he was not voting for Donald Trump, called his supporters idiots, said that Donald Trump was reprehensible. He even compared Donald Trump to being, quote, America's Hitler in a leaked text message exchange from a former roommate. JD Vance has made a number of comments about the former president, but also has made comments that make Donald Trump's candidacy itself entirely invalid. He suggested that he believed Donald Trump's sexual assault accusers. He's gone after Donald Trump and liked tweets referring to Donald Trump as a serial sexual assaulter. JD Vance has made comments around abortion. He talked about different things that he really should not have associated with his name, and ultimately seems to be even more right-wing than Donald Trump himself. In some instances, he's been called out for promoting a replacement theory. That is the idea that white Americans are being pushed out by a whole array of different minority groups, depending on who's advocating for the replacement theory. It is a very racist conspiracy, and one that has been known across politics to be something that is completely unfounded in reality, but equally never something to be associated with any political candidate. JD Vance has done many different things that have made him not as palatable to the average voter, and that becomes a major problem. But it doesn't just end there. JD Vance coming into this doesn't really add much to the ticket at all. I think that what we have come to understand in vice presidential tickets with Kamala Harris in 2020, she provided a level of electoral advantage. She inspired young Americans. She inspired minority Americans. She did what the Biden base needed to do, and that was really locked down. Voting groups that Democrats needed to turn out in 2020, and they did turn out in 2020. When Mike Pence was chosen for vice president, that was a calculated decision. Mike Pence, who comes into this as a much more presidential figure, someone who could be seen as tempering Donald Trump, JD Vance is not that. But what I'm more concerned about is electability. JD Vance and Marco Rubio, both of the two in contention, were coming from swing states. Marco Rubio from Florida, JD Vance from Ohio. And to put things into perspective, back in 2020, Donald Trump won the state of Ohio by roughly 8 points nationally. And so, or rather statewide. Nationally, though, Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.5%. So Biden's winning the popular vote by 4.5. Ohio is going to Trump by 8. That's roughly a 12.5% delta in difference between the two in the presidential race in Ohio versus the national presidential race. To put things into perspective about JD Vance's quote-unquote electability and why he really doesn't have any, we have to go back to the 2022 Senate elections. JD Vance, as I said, would be the least experienced vice presidential pick in a very long time. Equally, he was elected to the U.S. Senate back in 2022, and let's talk about why this should be a point of concern for Republicans. JD Vance won against Representative Tim Ryan in the Ohio Senate race by 6 percentage points. Now, to put things back into context, Donald Trump won Ohio by 8 points when Biden was winning by 4.5. In 2022, Republicans won the national popular vote by 3 points nationwide. JD Vance only outran the national popular vote by 3 points in the state of Ohio. Had this been a better circumstance for Democrats, arguably 2018 or even 2020 based on national metrics, Ohio very well could have gone blue in the Senate race, and the fact that that was even possible speaks to the weakness that JD Vance has as a candidate. Because he was unelectable from the beginning, obviously won a Senate race because Ohio is a red state, but given another swing state, JD Vance would have underperformed Donald Trump in a year where Republicans arguably should have done a lot better. And I mean, it isn't even just that. JD Vance, quite frankly, adds nothing else to the ticket, because what we saw here in comparison to 2020 is that every county, with the exception of just 2 or 3, voted to the left of 2020. This wasn't some type of suburban reversion. This was a statewide reversion across rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. Everybody said, we don't like JD Vance. And although Ohio fundamentally is a red state, JD Vance proved that some people can make it even closer when there really should have been no circumstance. Again, outrunning the national popular vote by 3 points for Republicans when Trump did it by 12.5%. So now what you're thinking about Ohio, I don't think it'll be competitive. Trump's still going to win the state with or without JD Vance. The question is, though, what level of electability did JD Vance add to the ticket besides the fact that he is young? I think that might have been the only saving grace that Donald Trump had in consideration when making JD Vance as his VP, because Chris LaSavita, Donald Trump's senior campaign manager, alongside many other Republicans from the Trump camp, had said they want to choose somebody. They want to pick somebody who can run for 8 more years after a Trump presidency. JD Vance and Marco Rubio were really the only ones who fit into there. Doug Burgum would have been a better pick than I think both of them. I think it could, the order at which I would have gone if I was Donald Trump: Doug Burgum first, Marco Rubio second, JD Vance third. JD Vance, honestly, F tier, low. I would have chosen Tim Scott before I chose JD Vance. Obviously, that didn't happen. Point being, the decisions that were made here, I think, were not rooted in any level of calculation outside of vibes. And while that may have worked for Trump in the past, I think there was a very strong decision and political instincts, decision-making capability of the Trump campaign back in 2016 when they chose Mike Pence as the VP. A lot of the decisions that have been made in the past, I think, have been really rooted in strong performance electorally. I don't think this is one of those instances, and I really find it difficult to believe. And it did happen, so it did absolutely, it came forward, but I really find it difficult to believe that Donald Trump did not see this as too much of a liability. Because it actually came up in 2022. This was released to the Ohio Capitol Journal before JD Vance was chosen as the not the VP nominee, well, obviously before the VP nominee, before he was endorsed by Donald Trump in the Republican primary here. He said, he compared Donald Trump, saying, I don't know if Trump is America's Hitler. He goes out on all these different attacks on Trump supporters. He voted for Evan McMullin in 2016. I mean, you are talking about someone who didn't even cast their ballot for the only time Donald Trump has ever proven he is an electoral success in this nation. And he is now running at the top of the ticket for Donald Trump to be his VP. It is absolutely a warped reality. Imagine this 8 years ago, JD Vance, who went publicly and said, I'm a never Trump Republican. I would never vote for Donald Trump. He is insane. He is completely against everything we see in this party. I mean, even in recently as 2021, when he was considering running, made this a big thing when he was considering going up for the Senate bid and he was running in the very early stages. This was around July 2021. He said that Donald Trump views suck-ups as weak. And while he has become certainly more positive around Donald Trump since the 2020 election, at this point, too, he wasn't a full-fledged endorsement of Donald Trump. He wasn't a full-fledged, MAGA Republican. And while he certainly pivoted to that very quickly, and you can see it, this is an early inclination stage where he realized this is the only pathway to the Senate bid here. It was very interesting to see the way that JD Vance over the past 8 years has really evolved from 31 years old to 39 years old, how he has really evolved around the election of Donald Trump and how Donald Trump has become this figure who at one point he viewed in such a negative light. Well, I do think a lot of this, if I'm being completely honest, is grifting. I think a lot of what you find in American politics is that you do have to make a decision, and a political calculus decision that tells you, this is what's right for me at the time. This is how I get elected to the U.S. Senate. It's something that everybody sort of understands you do in politics. That's why people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, despite the many layers of insults that Donald Trump threw on him and threw on both of them in 2016, and arguably even after, that they decided to endorse him, back him, and realize that without him, they lose their primaries, they lose their Senate seats, and they need him. JD Vance realized that. But this is taking it a little bit too far in the sense that he is now going to be Donald Trump's running mate and has all of this to answer for. Again, I think there's a problem when your own VP has made such negative comments about you. I mean, even if you were to look back at the worst exchange between Vice President Harris and President Biden, you would look back at a 2019 Democratic primary debate and you would throw that up as one of the 30 different references that JD Vance has here in comparison. I mean, you are talking about a whole list here. You can look at it. If you're looking at the highlighted thing, Donald Trump's deleted tweets talking about Lord help us when Donald Trump is chosen, saying that he's someone who fights Trump most aggressively, that he didn't vote for Trump. Trump is reprehensible, called Trump's America's Hitler, believes Trump's accusers, says that people should stay in violent marriages. This was an op-ed that he wrote, ran a fake opioid charity. All of these different things. I'm telling you, there are so many different things here that really make him unpalatable. But the one that I think is going to end up being one of the most important, besides the way that he approaches Donald Trump, is the way that he interacts. The way that he interacts with the issue of abortion, in which he backed Lindsey Graham's national abortion ban of 15 weeks, and also on his campaign website said that he was 100% pro-life, ending abortion, believes abortion has turned our society into a place where we see children as an inconvenience to be thrown away rather than a blessing to be nurtured. And JD Vance, too, when asked about the instances of rape and incest with abortion, he responds and says, 2 wrongs don't make a right, equating abortion to rape and incest, additionally, too, going at this and saying that, this is why we need to have abortion bans in place, backing abortion bans in states with 6-week bans. This just gave the Democratic Party the necessary advertisement material surrounding the issue of abortion to bring it back up and say, wait a minute, even if Donald Trump himself has shifted his issue on abortion, JD Vance was calling for this a year ago. Less than a year ago. I mean, you are talking about in the wake of the Dobbs decision. JD Vance, when he was running for Senate, was vehemently pro-life and has not adopted a change besides shifting his opinion on abortion bills a week ago prior to being announced as VP. But that simply isn't enough. And voters still care about abortion. I know we're still in this phase where it seems that this never mattered as an issue. I mean, that is really what the mainstream media has been trying to push here. And I think a lot of it is, too, just missing voters. A lot of what voters do care about, the economy, how they're getting food on the table, living paycheck to paycheck. They're caring about gas prices. They care about healthcare. They care about immigration and the southern border crisis. Equally, too, you find that a lot of women in this nation care about the issue of abortion. A lot of men, too. And while it may be an inspiring issue for the right, has been for 50 years, it has now become an inspiring issue for the left. And Democrats need to make abortion a mainstream issue in this election, and I think they will have a great juxtaposition to do exactly that at a VP debate between JD Vance and Kamala Harris. And I think that is really something that Republicans just simply can't win on. Democrats can win on. They can win on abortion because they've done it before. And while JD Vance was someone that Democrats couldn't take down in 2022, understanding the circumstances around that really put into perspective, in fact, that he was not the strongest nominee for Senate in the first place. Democrats wanted him to be the nominee because they knew it would require Republicans to funnel, and this happened, millions upon millions of dollars to a race that otherwise could have been easily won. I mean, you look at the 2022 Senate race here, there were other nominees that Republicans could have put forth, and Ohio would have been a safer state. But it wasn't, because JD Vance was weak. He won by 6 when Trump won by 8. 2 years after, despite the national popular vote shifting 7.5% to the right. Ohio shifted 4 points, roughly 2 points to the left. So that's a huge delta between the two. It is an insane thing to think about, too, that JD Vance now comes into this as the least experienced, the youngest VP nominee in quite some time. And it reminds me a lot of when, John McCain said that Sarah Palin was going to be his choice. And in the decision he did so, he said F it, because there was not much you could do at this point in deciding that Sarah Palin was going to be your VP. I don't think this is an election that is comparable to John McCain's performance in 2008, but I do think the level of political instincts that we see in this race for Donald Trump's campaign really scares me if I was looking at this from a Republican standpoint. Because this election should be one of the easiest, most winnable elections for Republicans nationwide. And yet in all the down-ballot races, they're getting demolished, and the presidential race is their only saving grace. And the decisions that are being made at the top of the ticket, again, by Donald Trump and his closest advisors, really strike me as very poor and not strong picks whatsoever. When you take a look at who he's choosing for VP, when you're taking a look at who he's choosing to run the RNC, when you're taking a look at what he's deciding to do in states that truly are not as much of battleground states as you otherwise think, opening up 1920 campaign field offices in states that Democrats are going to win no matter what, no matter who you had as VP, even Glenn Youngkin, throw him on the ticket, Virginia would probably still vote for Joe Biden. And even then, that would be the only real reason you would invest in a state like Virginia. But already Trump has dedicated 19 field offices across Minnesota and Virginia. You're seeing that he's making a play for states like New Jersey. The polls may be saying Trump is winning. In no circumstance is Donald Trump winning New Jersey. And I think this is the level of political instincts that have really shown there's something, and there's a level of disconnect between what is actually happening in terms of voting and what's happening internally in the Trump team. And I think that's why they make decisions like this one. Donald Trump, if he is to win this election, will have done this not because he is the better candidate, but because American voters want to choose somebody else besides Joe Biden. And it's the same case that happened in 2020. American voters wanted somebody else besides Donald Trump. But that is a big if. The numbers are not good for Joe Biden whatsoever right now. I think we're, looking at this 114, 113 days out from the election, looking at it from the perspective of Joe Biden needs to turn this election around quite significantly. But Donald Trump has made it a lot easier when you choose a nominee who isn't someone who has gone through extensive vetting, a candidacy for president before, somebody like Marco Rubio or Doug Burgum, somebody who does not have as much of a deep digital footprint or deep anti-Trump footprint as JD Vance and hasn't done enough since 2016 to build it back up to being this loyal Trump-abiding citizen, right? I think that's really where the problem comes into, because now you're going to see ads being run. How is Donald Trump's own VP pick saying these things about him? Mike Pence, who might have voted for Ted Cruz in the primary, that was the biggest scandal we saw in terms of Donald Trump disloyalty. JD Vance has a lot more to answer for. And so many more questions. We have a whole next 4 months to talk about the VP nominee, talk about a Trump-Vance ticket, talk about the impact of Donald Trump choosing JD Vance. But as of right now, as you can tell from the title and from the contents of this video, I think this was a bad political decision. Is a campaign ending? By no means. But it certainly is something to think about, and you just make sure you watch over the next coming weeks in the scandals that break, the things that leak, the things that come out against JD Vance. The VP debate will be taking place shortly, roughly 2 weeks, less than that. I'm excited to watch it. I hope you are too. It's going to be interesting. We're in for a wild ride, a crazy, crazy past week. Donald Trump choosing JD Vance, new VP nominee. The question is, can they win this November? Right now, signs point to yes, but we have yet to see any polling with JD Vance on the ticket, and we have yet to see the true impact of choosing someone who was vehemently anti-Trump less than 8 years ago. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch in a playlist from my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.